The stars were cold and empty when humanity first left Earth. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. They knew nothing about the dangers waiting in the dark space between worlds. But still, they went. Hope pushed them forward, even when fear told them to stay home. The colony ship Dawn's Promise carried 12,000 souls. Men, women, and children slept in frozen chambers, while the ship crossed the endless black void. They dreamed of new worlds and fresh beginnings. They dreamed of green hills and blue oceans on planets far from the dying. Earth they left behind. Young Do-yoon Park was 17 years old. He worked as a junior maintenance officer, checking pipes and fixing small problems throughout the massive ship. His parents slept in the frozen chambers with the other colonists. Do-yoon had volunteered to stay awake during the journey to help keep everyone safe. He was checking a water recycling unit when the alarms started screaming. The ship's core had failed. Something deep inside the engine room had broken in a way that could not be fixed. Power flickered and died. Emergency lights painted everything in bloody red. The cold of space began creeping through the walls. Captain Uniquan gathered the skeleton crew on the bridge. Her face was pale, but her voice stayed steady. She told them the truth without pretty words. The ship was dying. They had maybe 3 days of emergency power left. After that, the frozen chambers would fail. 12,000 people would die in their sleep, never knowing what happened. Do-yoon stood at the back of the room listening. His hands shook. His parents were in those chambers. Everyone he knew and loved floated helplessly in the dark, waiting for death without even knowing it was coming. The distress signal went out into the void. It was a small hope. They were far from any human outpost. No one was coming to save them, but someone heard. On the 3rd day, when hope had almost completely died, strange ships appeared on their sensors. They were shaped like teardrops, smooth and beautiful, colored in soft blues and greens. They moved through space like fish swimming through water, graceful and quiet. The beings who spoke through the communication system had gentle voices like water flowing over stones. They called themselves the Valori. They were a peaceful species who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. They had heard the human distress call and came to help. Do-yoon watched through a viewport as the Valori ships surrounded the dying Dawn's Promise. He saw the rescue vessels attach themselves to the hull like caring hands cradling a wounded bird. He heard the hiss of atmosphere as the Valori pumped fresh air into their failing ship. He felt the warmth returning to the metal walls. A Valori rescue worker came aboard. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like pale blue glass. Do-yoon could see her organs moving softly inside her body. Her eyes were large and dark, filled with kindness that needed no translation. She touched his shoulder with long, delicate fingers. Her voice was soft in his ear, speaking words he did not understand but somehow felt in his heart. Everything would be okay. They were safe now. The Valori would take care of them. Over the next several days, the Valori towed the Dawn's Promise to one of their space stations. They repaired what could be fixed. They replaced what could not. They fed the hungry crew and treated the sick. They asked for nothing in return. Captain Kwan tried to offer payment. The Valori gently refused. She tried to promise future trade agreements and political alliances. Again, they said no. They had not saved the humans for profit or power. They had saved them because it was the right thing to do. Do-yoon asked one of the Valori engineers why they helped strangers who could give them nothing. The engineer tilted his smooth head. Confused by the question, his translator device hummed for a moment before he answered. You were dying. We could help. What other reason is needed? It was such a simple answer, so pure. Do-yoon felt tears running down his face, and he did not try to hide them. When the Dawn's Promise was finally ready to continue its journey, the entire crew gathered to say goodbye to their saviors. Captain Kwan gave a speech thanking the Valori, promising that humanity would never forget this kindness. Do-yoon made a personal promise that day. He swore on everything he loved that he would spend his life making sure humanity remembered. He would dedicate himself to building a civilization worthy of the gift they had been given. And someday, somehow, humanity would repay this debt. The years passed. Doyon became a soldier, then an officer, then a commander. Humanity spread across the stars, building colonies on dozens of worlds. They became traders and diplomats. They made friends, and sometimes enemies, among the alien species of the galaxy. But they never forgot the Valori. Doyon created a special department within the human government. Its only job was to record every kindness shown to humanity by other species, every helping hand, every fair deal, every act of mercy and grace. The records grew thick with entries over the centuries. Human science found ways to extend life far beyond normal limits. Doyon took the treatments. He needed to stay alive. He needed to watch. He needed to wait for the day when humanity could finally repay what they owed. The Valori never changed. They remained peaceful and gentle, tending their water gardens on their blue-green homeworld. They sang their ancient songs and lived their quiet lives. They never asked humanity for anything. They seemed to have forgotten the rescue that happened so long ago, but Doyon remembered. Humanity remembered. 300 years after the rescue of the Dawn's Promise, Doyon was an old man with white hair and deep lines on his face, but his eyes were still sharp. His mind was still clear, and his promise still burned bright in his heart. He was in his office, looking at old pictures from the rescue, when his communication device buzzed with an urgent message. The Keth Empire had invaded Valori space. The peaceful people who had saved 12,000 human lives were under attack. Their world was burning. Their people were dying. And the galaxy was doing nothing to help them. Doyon read the message 3 times. His old hands stopped shaking. A cold calm settled over him like armor made of ice. 300 years he had waited. 300 years he had prepared. Now the moment had finally come. He pressed a button on his desk. A young officer's face appeared on the screen. "Contact the Parliament," Doyon said, his voice hard as steel. "Tell them it is time. Humanity is going to war." The Keth were born to conquer. Their bodies were hard shells and sharp edges. Their minds thought only of expansion and control. For 1,000 years, they had swept across the galaxy like a slow-moving fire, burning everything they touched. They came from a harsh world where only the strongest survived. They learned early that the universe gave nothing freely. Everything had to be taken. Weakness was death. Mercy was foolishness. These lessons were carved into their very bones. When the Keth looked at the Valori, they saw easy prey. A peaceful species with no military. A beautiful world rich with resources. The Valor had water, which the Keth needed. They had technology, which the Keth wanted, and they had no way to fight back. The invasion began on a quiet morning on Sirith Prime, the Valori homeworld. Keth warships filled the sky like a swarm of metal insects. Their weapons turned the upper atmosphere into fire. Their soldiers dropped from the burning clouds in armored pods, crashing into cities and farms and sacred places. The Valori did not understand at first. War was a concept they had abandoned thousands of years ago. They had no word for invasion in their language. When the Keth soldiers marched through their streets, the Valori tried to greet them as guests. The Keth killed them. Anyway, news of the attack spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Diplomats made speeches. Committees held meetings. Strongly worded messages were sent to the Keth High Command, demanding an explanation and urging restraint. The Keth ignored all of it. They had heard such words before. The galaxy was full of species who talked about justice, but did nothing to enforce it. Words were empty. Only power was real. Ambassador Nari Song was eating breakfast on the human capital world when her assistant rushed in with the news. She dropped her cup, and it shattered on the floor. For a long moment, she simply stared at the report on her screen, unable to believe what she was reading. The Valori. The gentle, peaceful Valori who had saved her ancestors. Being slaughtered by insects who saw them as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Nari has grown up hearing stories about the rescue of the Dawn's Promise. Every human child learned that history. It was part of who they were as a species. The Valori were not just allies or friends. They were family in a way that went deeper than blood. She contacted Admiral Doyon Park immediately. His old face appeared on her screen, and she saw that he already knew. There was a fire in his eyes that made her shiver. "Call an emergency session of Parliament," he told her. "I will be there within the hour." The Parliament building was the largest structure on the human capital world. It held representatives from every human colony and outpost in the galaxy. Today, every seat was filled. The air was thick with tension and anger and something else. Something dangerous. Nari walked to the central podium. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to carry her forward. She looked out at the thousands of faces watching her. Some were crying. Some were furious. All were waiting to hear what she would say. She began by playing a recording. It was old and scratchy, covered from the archives of the Dawn's Promise, a Vellery voice, gentle and calm, speaking to the terrified human crew. "Everything will be okay. We are here to help. You are safe now," when the recording ended. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Nari spoke quietly, but her words carried to every corner of the massive room. She told the story of the rescue. She talked about the 12,000 lives saved. She described how the Valori had asked for nothing in return, how they had simply helped because it was right. Then, she placed a data chip on the podium. It contained the full records of the rescue, every detail preserved for 300 years. "The Valori saved us when we were weak and helpless," Nari said. "They showed us kindness when we had nothing to offer. Now they are dying. Their world is burning, and the galaxy stands by and watches." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The galaxy may have forgotten what kindness means, but we have not. We remember every favor. We remember every helping hand, and we know what we owe." Admiral Doyon Park rose from his seat in the front row. Though he was old, though his body was bent by centuries of living, there was steel in his spine and thunder in his voice. "I was there," he said. "I was 17 years old when the Valori saved my life. I watched their ships come out of the darkness like angels. I felt their hands lift me up when I was ready to die." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of the representatives one by one. "I have spent 300 years preparing for this moment. 300 years building our fleets and training our soldiers. Not for conquest. Not for glory. But for this. For the day when we could finally repay our debt." He raised his hand, pointing toward the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. "The Valori did not hesitate when we needed them. They did not hold meetings or write reports. They simply came. They simply helped. Now it is our turn." The vote was called. Not a single voice spoke against it. Not a single hand was raised in opposition. The decision was unanimous. Humanity was going to war. Admiral Park took command of the combined human fleets. 15 full battle groups, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet. Soldiers by the millions put on their armor and checked their weapons. Ships that had been held in reserve for generations finally roared to life. Lieutenant Suu Kim was assigned as the Admiral's personal aide. He was young and nervous, fresh from the academy. As he watched the mobilization unfold, he felt a strange mix of fear and pride swelling in his chest. "Sir," he said to the Admiral as they stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching ships gather in formation around them. "The Keth Empire has held its territory for 1,000 years. They have never been defeated in open war. Are you certain we can win?" Admiral Park did not answer right away. He stared out at the stars, his old eyes seeing something beyond the physical realm. Memories, perhaps. Or dreams of justice to long delayed. "Keth fight for power and resources," he finally said. "They fight because they want more of what they already have. But we fight for something else. We fight to repay a debt that has been owed for 3 centuries. We fight for gratitude. We fight for honor." He turned to look at the young lieutenant with eyes that had seen centuries pass. "They have never faced an enemy like us. They have never known what it means to fight against people who will not stop, cannot stop. Because stopping means betraying everything they believe in." The Admiral straightened his old back and set his jaw. "Ready the fleets?" he ordered. "We leave within the hour." The Valori have waited long enough. And across human space, millions of hearts, beat as one. Millions of voices whispered the same promise. We remember. We are coming. We will repay what we owe. The Keth had no idea what was about to hit them. The Keth High Command received the human declaration of war, with clicking sounds that passed for laughter among their kind. Their war masters gathered around tactical displays, studying the human fleet positions with cold amusement. Humanity was young. Their species had only walked among the stars for a few centuries. They were soft creatures, made of weak flesh and thin bones. The Keth had crushed a dozen such races before. This would be no different. War Master Crix, the senior military commander, made his prediction to the High Queen herself. The humans would make noise. They would perhaps fight a few border skirmishes to save their pride. Then they would retreat and accept reality as all the others had done. The High Queen clicked her approval. She returned to more important matters. The conquest of the Valori homeworld was proceeding on schedule. Soon the Water Singers would be enslaved, their world stripped bare. Their resources feeding the endless hunger of the Keith Empire. That confidence lasted. Exactly 6 days. The human armada arrived through fold space with a flash of light that briefly outshone the local sun. Not a patrol force. Not a defensive fleet. Every single warship that humanity possessed appeared in the skies above. Cirith Prime at the same moment. Captain Hunali stood on the bridge of her destroyer. The kindness returned. She was 32 years old, born on a mining colony near human space's outer edge. Her grandmother had been on the Dawn's Promise as a child. The stories of the Valori rescue had been her bedtime tales growing up now. She stared at the Keth blockades surrounding the Valori world. Hundreds of enemy ships formed a wall of metal and weapons between her fleet and the planet below. Behind that wall, the Velari were dying. Admiral Park's voice came through the communication system, broadcast to every human ship. His words were simple. They saved us. Now we save them. Attack. The human fleet surged forward, like a wave crashing against rocks. Huna's ship was among the first to reach the enemy line. She had volunteered for the lead position, knowing the danger, accepting it gladly. If she died here, she would die repaying the debt her family had owed for generations. The kindness returned, punched through a gap in the Keth formation.
Our weapons.
Firing in all directions. Enemy ships exploded around her. Alarms screamed warnings that she ignored. Her crew moved with perfect training, every action flowing into the next without hesitation. All ships, Huna broadcast across open channels, remember why we are here. Remember the Dawn's Promise. Remember that someone believed we were worth saving. Other human captains echoed her words. The message spread from ship to ship until it became a war cry that filled every communication frequency. We remember. We remember. We remember. The Keth fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were powerful. Their tactics were proven by 1,000 years of conquest. But they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that would not stop. An enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every loss instead of weaker. Human ships fell in flames. Good men and women died in the cold vacuum of space. But for every human vessel destroyed, 2 more pushed forward to take its place. The Keth blockade began to crack. On the planet's surface, the situation was desperate. Keth soldiers had occupied most of the major cities. Valori civilians huddled in underground shelters, listening to the sounds of destruction above them. They had lost hope. They were simply waiting to die. Then the sky changed. The dull gray of Keth's ships was replaced by something new, something bright. Human dropships descended through the atmosphere like falling stars, trailing fire and hope in equal measure. Sergeant Junhobik was among the first soldiers to touch Valori soil. His squad landed in a coastal city that had been beautiful before the invasion. Now its elegant towers were broken. Its crystal bridges had shattered. Bodies floated in the sacred pools where the Valor had sung their ancient songs. Junho felt rage building in his chest. These peaceful people, these gentle souls who had saved his ancestors, had been butchered by monsters who saw them as nothing more than objects to be used and discarded. His squad pushed through the ruined streets, and fighting Keth soldiers at every corner. The enemy was tough, their shells hard to penetrate, but Junho's people had trained for this. They knew where to aim. They knew how to kill. In the basement of a collapsed building, Junho found survivors. A group of Valerie, mostly elderly and young, had hidden themselves away when the invasion began. They stared at the human soldiers with wide, frightened eyes. An old Valori female moved toward Junho. Her translucent skin was marked with wounds. Her large eyes were filled with confusion and pain. "Why?" she asked in broken common, the trading language of the galaxy. "Why do you fight for us? We are strangers to you." "Ah!" Junho lowered his weapon. He removed his helmet so she could see his face. He wanted her to see that he was just a person, not a machine, not a monster like the Keth. 300 years ago, he said softly, a human ship was dying in the dark. 12,000 people waited to die. Your people came. Your people saved them. They asked for nothing in return. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder, just as a Valori rescuer had once touched young Doyon Park. "You saved us first. Now we save you." "That is why," the old Valerie began to weep. Tears like liquid crystal rolled down her strange, beautiful face. She had forgotten. After so many centuries, her people had forgotten what they had done. But the humans had not. Above the planet, the battle continued to rage. Captain Huna's ship was badly damaged, but still fighting. She had lost a third of her crew. Fire burned in corridors that she could not seal, but the Keth blockade was breaking. "Push through," she ordered, her voice hoarse from shouting. "We are almost there. Give them everything we have left." The human fleet obeyed. Ship after ship threw themselves at the enemy, caring nothing for their own survival, caring only about reaching the people they had come to save. And finally, impossibly, they broke through. The Keth fleet scattered. Some retreated to regroup. Others fled the system entirely, unable to comprehend what was happening. For the first time in 1,000 years, the mighty Keth Empire was running from a battle. Admiral Park watched from his flagship as human. Ships took up protective positions around Sirith Prime. Medical vessels descended to help the wounded. Supply ships brought food and water and medicine. Just as the Valerie had once cared for dying humans, now humans cared for dying Valerie. The Admiral allowed himself a small smile. This was only the beginning. The Keth would return with more ships, more soldiers. The war would continue for months or years. But today, right now, they had won the first victory. Commander Yunbihan approached him with a report. The Keth forces were regrouping in nearby systems. They were calling for reinforcements from their empire's core worlds. The real fight was still to come. Park nodded, unsurprised. "Let them gather their strength. We will face whatever they bring. This debt has been owed for 300 years. We will not stop until it is fully repaid." He looked out at the blue-green world below, where Valerie survivors were emerging from their shelters to see skies free of enemy, as ships for the first time since the invasion began. "Today, the galaxy learns what human gratitude looks like," he said quietly, "and they will never forget." News of the human victory at Sirith Prime spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species with access to faster-than-light communication heard the story. The young humans, the small humans, the weak humans, had broken a Keth blockade. They had pushed back an empire that had never known defeat. Some dismissed it as luck. Others said it was a temporary setback that the Keth would quickly correct. But many listened more carefully. They saw something in the human victory that frightened and fascinated them in equal measure. The humans had not fought for territory. They had not fought for resources or power. They had fought to save strangers who had helped them centuries ago. They had sacrificed ships and soldiers and treasure for nothing more than a debt of gratitude. This was something new. This was something the galaxy did not know how to understand. Counselor. Minji Yoon arrived at the Galactic Assembly 3 weeks after the battle. The Assembly was the closest thing the galaxy had to a unified government. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered there to argue and negotiate, occasionally accomplish something useful. Mingi walked through the great hall with her head held high. She felt the stares of dozens of alien eyes following her movement. Some looked at her with new respect. Others watched with fear. A few seemed embarrassed, and she knew why. The assembly had done nothing while the Valori burned. They had sent messages and held meetings and accomplished nothing. Now a young species, barely a newcomer to galactic affairs, had done what they could not. Had done what they would not. She took her place at the speaking platform and looked out at the gathered representatives. Silence fell across the hall. "We are not here to ask for your help," Minji said, her voice cold and clear. "We are here to inform you. Humanity remembers its friends. We remember every kindness shown to us, every hand extended when we were weak, every mercy given when we deserved none." She paused, letting her words settle into the minds of her audience. "We also remember those who did nothing, those who watched while innocent people died and lifted not a single finger to help. We keep very good records." Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The implication was impossible to miss. Humanity remembered its friends, but they also remembered everyone else. After the speech, something unexpected began to happen. Ships from other species started arriving in human space, offering assistance. The Reneth were the first. They were an old and cautious species, slow to act, careful in everything they did. But centuries ago, when a lost human exploration vessel had wandered into dangerous territory, a Reneth navigator had provided them with star charts to find their way home. A small favor, quickly forgotten by the Reneth. The humans had not forgotten. Now the Reneth sent a message to Admiral Park. They would provide supply ships and repair facilities. They would help humanity in any way they could. Not because they were ordered to, but because they had realized something important. Helping humanity was an investment that paid dividends for centuries. The Skull came next. They were merchants, traders, who had built wealth through fair dealing across the galaxy. In humanity's early days, when other species had tried to cheat and exploit the newcomers, the Skull had insisted on honest prices and equal treatment. They had taught humans how to navigate galactic commerce without being destroyed by it. Now they opened their supply depots to the human war effort. Fuel and food and medicine flowed freely to wherever it was needed. The Skull asked for no payment. They were simply returning a favor, they said, building trust that would last for generations. Admiral Park watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. This was what he had always hoped for. This was why humanity had kept such careful records of every kindness received. Gratitude was not just a feeling, it was a strategy. It was a way of building a network of friends who would stand together when the darkness came. The war continued to expand. Human fleets struck at Keth's military installations throughout the region. Supply lines were cut. Reinforcement routes were blocked. The methodical Keth found themselves facing an enemy who seemed to be everywhere at once. Lieutenant Siwoo Kim brought daily reports to the Admiral's command center. Each one told the same story. Victory after victory. System after system freed from Keith control, but there were costs. Human casualties mounted. Ships were lost. Families received messages telling them their loved ones would not be coming home. The price of repaying the old debt was measured in blood and tears. Commander Yoon Bi-han worried about the Admiral. He was old, even with the life extension treatments that kept him alive. The stress of commanding a galactic war would break a younger person. She watched him carefully for signs of weakness. She found none. If anything, the Admiral seemed stronger than he had been in decades. The war had given him purpose. After 300 years of waiting, he was finally doing what he had promised to do as a 17-year-old boy watching Valori rescue. Ships appear in the darkness. The Keth High Command finally understood that they were facing something they had never encountered before. This was not a normal war. This was not about territory or resources. This was about something deeper, something their cold insect minds struggled to comprehend. They began to prepare for a final stand. Every available ship was called back to defend the Keth homeworld. Every soldier was mobilized. Every weapon was readied. If they were going to fall, they would take as many humans with them as possible. War Master Crix studied the human attack patterns, looking for weaknesses. He found none. The humans did not fight like logical beings. They took risks that made no sense. They sacrificed themselves in ways that no rational species would accept. And yet somehow, impossibly, they kept winning. The High Queen summoned Crix to her throne chamber. She wanted answers. She wanted to know how a young, weak species could be tearing her ancient empire apart. Crix had no answers to give. He could only report the facts. The humans fought with a passion that bordered on madness. They showed no fear of death. They seemed to welcome it, if dying meant accomplishing their mission. They fight for the water singers, the High Queen said, her mandibles clicking with disbelief. They throw away their lives for a species that offers them nothing. This makes no sense, Crix agreed. It made no sense at all. And that was what made it so terrifying. Back in human space, Counselor Mingi Yoon received reports from across the galaxy. Species who had remained neutral were now openly supporting humanity. Others were reconsidering their relationships with the Keth Empire. The balance of power was shifting in ways that no one could have predicted. She thought about what humanity had built over the centuries. Not just ships and weapons, but something more valuable. A reputation. A promise that every kindness would be remembered and repaid. That every friend would be protected, no matter the cost. It was the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. And now everyone knew it. Admiral Park reviewed the final attack plans in his quarters. The assault on Keth Prime would be the largest military operation in human history. Everything they had would be thrown at the enemy homeworld. Victory would break the Keth Empire forever. Defeat would cost humanity dearly. He looked at an old photograph on his desk. It showed a young man in a maintenance uniform, standing next to a Valori rescuer aboard the Dawn's Promise. The young man's eyes were bright with gratitude and wonder. 300 years? It had taken 300 years to reach this moment, but the wait was almost over. Soon the debt would be fully paid. Soon humanity would prove to the galaxy that their word meant something. That their gratitude was not just talk, but action. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Then he gave the order, all fleets advance. Target Keth Prime. May whatever happens next be worthy of the gift they received so long ago. The final battle for Keth Prime began at dawn on the enemy homeworld. Human ships filled the sky from horizon to horizon, so many that they blocked out the pale light of the Keth sun. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by any species in recorded galactic history. Admiral Do-Yeon Park stood on the bridge of his flagship. It's the eternal gratitude. His old body ached from centuries of living. His bones were tired. His heart was worn. His spirit burned brighter than any star in the sky. All ships he broadcast to the fleet. Remember why we are here? Remember the Dawn's Promise? Remember the Valori who came for us in the dark? Today we finish what we started 300 years ago. The Keth threw everything they had at the human armada. Warships that had been kept in reserve for generations. Secret weapons developed in hidden laboratories. Soldiers bred from birth to fight and die for their queen. It was the full might of an empire that had never known defeat. It was not enough. Human ships pushed through the Keth defenses with a fury that defied logic. They took damage that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. They suffered losses. That should have broken their will and pushed forward anyway. Nothing could stop them. Nothing could slow them down. Captain Huna Lee had been given command of a new ship after her old one was destroyed at Cirith Prime. She named it the Second Chance, after the opportunity the Valori had given humanity so long ago. Now she led her squadron through the burning wreckage of Keth's defense platforms. Clearing a path for the ground assault forces, her ship was hit by enemy fire again and again. Sections of the hull were blown away. Crew members died at their stations. But Huna refused to retreat. She had come too far. They all had come too far. Keep firing, she ordered through gritted teeth. We stop when they stop, not before. On the ground, the invasion force landed in the capital city of Keth Prime. Human soldiers poured out of their transports, weapons ready, hearts pounding. The Keth defended their home with desperate strength, knowing that this was their last chance, their final moment. Lieutenant Hannah Cho led her platoon through streets that looked like something from a nightmare. Buildings of black metal towered above them. covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at. The air smelled of chemicals and death. Enemy soldiers attacked from every shadow. Hannah had joined the military because of stories her grandfather told her. Stories about a rescue ship called the Dawn's Promise. Stories about gentle aliens who saved humans they had never met. Stories about a debt that had been owed for centuries. Now she was here, on the enemy homeworld, fighting to finish what her ancestors had started. Every step was for them. Every bullet was for them. Every breath was a prayer of gratitude to the Valori who had made her existence possible. Her platoon took heavy casualties. Friends died in her arms. She kept moving forward. There was no other choice. The battle lasted 72 hours. 3 full days of constant fighting without rest or relief. Human soldiers pushed deeper and deeper into the Keth capital, fighting for every street, every building, every room. Finally, they reached the palace of the High Queen. The last Keth defenders fought with the strength of those who had nothing left to lose. They killed many humans. They died themselves, one by one, until none were left. Then the palace doors stood open, and the human soldiers walked through. Admiral Park descended from his flagship to meet the High Queen face to face. He walked through the broken palace with slow, careful steps. His guards surrounded him, weapons ready, watching for any remaining threats. The throne chamber was a vast space filled with strange art and ancient trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. At its center sat the High Queen, last ruler of the Keth Empire. Her insect body was ancient and massive, covered in scars from wars that predated human space travel. She watched the old human approach with eyes that held no fear, only cold curiosity. "You have destroyed my empire," she said through her translator device. Her voice clicked and buzzed, but the mechanical words came through clearly. "For what? A race of weak water singers who offer you nothing. This makes no sense." Park stopped a few meters from the throne. He looked up at the creature that had caused so much suffering. He felt no hatred, only a tired satisfaction. "They offered humanity kindness when we were weak and helpless," he said. "They saved 12,000 lives without asking for anything in return. You could never understand what that means to us." The High Queen's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or contempt. "Kindness is weakness. The galaxy belongs to the strong." Park shook his head slowly. "The galaxy belongs to those who remember, who honor their debts, who stand by their friends when everything is dark and hopeless." He turned away from the throne, addressing his soldiers instead. "Take her into custody. Inform the Galactic Assembly that the Keth Empire has fallen. All enslaved populations are to be freed immediately. The Keth military will be disarmed and disbanded." He paused at the door of the throne chamber, looking back one final time at the fallen queen. "You could have built alliances based on trust and gratitude," he said. "You could have made friends instead of slaves. Instead, you chose conquest and cruelty. This is where that path leads." In the months that followed, the galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Keth Empire was dismantled. Their conquered worlds were freed. Their weapons were destroyed. 1,000 years of tyranny ended, not with a whimper, but with a thunder that echoed across every corner of known space. The Valori homeworld began to heal. Human engineers and builders worked alongside Valori craftspeople to repair what the invasion had broken. The sacred pools were refilled. Crystal towers were rebuilt. The ancient songs were sung again under clear skies. Admiral Doyon Park retired at last. He had lived 320 years, longer than any human had a right to expect. He had kept his promise. The debt was repaid. He spent his final days on Sirith Prime, sitting by one of the restored pools, listening to the Valor sing their evening songs. The music was strange and beautiful, like water and starlight mixed together. A young Valori approached him one evening as the sun was setting. She was barely grown, born after the war ended. She knew of the invasion only through stories. "They say your people saved us," she said in perfect common. She had learned the language, just to speak with the humans who had become such frequent visitors. "They say, you fought and died for us." Park smiled, his old face creasing with tired joy. "Your people saved us first," he said. "A long time ago, when we were lost and dying in the dark, we simply returned the favor. The young Valori sat beside him, thinking about his words. Then she began to sing, softly at first, then louder. It was a new song, one that had been written after the war. It told the story of small creatures from a distant world who came to help when all hope was lost, who remembered kindness across centuries, who proved that the galaxy was not as cold and cruel as it seemed. Across the stars, the story spread. Young races, struggling colonies, species just beginning to reach for the sky. All of them heard about what humanity had done. They learned the lesson that the Keth had refused to understand. Kindness was not weakness. It was the strongest force in the galaxy, and humanity remembered every favor, every helping hand, every act of mercy and grace. They kept careful records, not of grudges, but of debts. Debts they would spend eternity repaying. The galaxy looked at the humans differently now. Not as a young species to be ignored or exploited, but as something new, something important, something that might just change everything. And in the hearts of 100 worlds, hope began to grow. Because if the humans remembered every favor, then maybe the galaxy was not such a lonely place after all. Maybe there were friends out there waiting to be found. Maybe kindness would be repaid even across centuries and stars. Maybe, just maybe, the darkness was not as dark as it seemed. The echo of humanity's gratitude rang across the galaxy, and it would never fade.